and welcome back to the Talks of Life podcast. Today, I have a wonderful guest by the name of Meer. He is the director for Sustainable Kashi, and that is in Sebastian, Florida. Is that correct?
Yes, it is. We're on the East Coast, about halfway down in Florida, and it's just a beautiful, beautiful space surrounded by nature.
Yeah, I'm very happy to have you on. As I shared with you, I've been watching some of the free permaculture classes, and it's just super awesome that there's people like you know, offering that time and space and platform for people to continue to educate and spread the message of regenerative agriculture, permaculture practices, and all the above. I know that it's a big umbrella of information, but it all is very interconnected, and I think you do a really good job of weaving it all together. So I would love to just kind of chat about that today.
Oh, thanks, Brittany, and thanks for having me on today. It's really wonderful that people are having these discussions, and I'm more than happy to share my experience. When I first grew up, I actually was born on a sailboat down in Dinner Key, which is right by Coconut Grove in Miami. So we pulled in. I was actually, my first experiences in this life was a 2 a.m. bus ride down the streets of Miami to a hospital. And I of course don't remember any of that, but it was, I'm sure it added to the adventure. But growing up on the boat really kind of forced me to think about things that most children never have to think about. And all these conveniences that most people have, you realize the price of them. So you're free to make all the garbage you want on a boat, but eventually you got to take it off the boat. You know, it's like all the water that you use in that shower has to be collected from somewhere. Either you're carrying it or you're limited to the size of your rain catchment cistern. So growing up with those limitations really helped me perceptualize the world in a different lens. And so it's one of the greatest gifts. And I'm always say that I was born from hippie pirates, and my parents just sailed the Keys, and that was their life. And it was one of the greatest gifts they could have ever possibly given to me.
Very cool. So were you kind of given the training, of course, by then? I guess by the age of like, what, 5, you knew how to sail, collect the water, knew it was all like a full circle, almost a closed loop system in itself that you needed to maintain.
Absolutely. And it was close to a closed loop system. Like I said, there's ways to cheat it. You know, you can always take your bags of garbage off of the boat,
Sure.
but it's just easier to live in a closed loop system.
Mhm.
So it wasn't even taught to me differently. It was taught to me as that this is life. This is how you live. So if I wanted to go outside, I was going for a swim. If I wanted to exercise, I was usually scraping barnacles off the bottom of the boat. And it's just a different type of life.
Mhm.
And it wasn't until the 5th grade that I moved off the boat and into to Melbourne, Florida, actually. And that was where I got to experience my first garden. And that kind of really changed. That was a game changer for me.
Mhm.
The idea that we could just put these seeds into the ground and grow food really just opened my eyes. And it was this whole new experience of connection to nature. And I was only in the 5th grade, so I can't imagine I was too profoundly connected. But I remember pulling food straight from the earth, not even washing it off, and just eating it, and just being filled with energy and that feeling of deep connection. So that was really nice.
Yeah. Was this a community garden or a school garden? Do you remember where that
No,
was?
my stepmom had a just backyard
Okay.
garden, and it was a
Awesome.
relatively large garden. I would say it was about a 20 by 20, so it wasn't too small, but it was my job to weed, and then of course I was always included on plantings and harvestings. So it was a great experience just to be exposed to that side of the world.
Sure. Almost like, because you were at sea for so many years, and then to touch land almost, it was like this reconnection to, oh, there's 2 different ways we can live almost, yeah? Or source food from, I suppose.
Absolutely. Just like playing with the bugs and all these things. I had missed all of that. And
Mhm.
my little animal friends were the fish. So all of a
Sure.
sudden I had worms, and it really expanded my horizons.
Very unique. So did that lead you into continuing your education and, then falling back into learning more about ecology or?
Yeah, it definitely set up the groundwork for everything. Life was a little strange for me because all of the people I met on dry land were leaving lights on. You know, they were leaving the faucets on. They were doing all these things that I just were it was an amazement of how people could live like this. It was I realized that I was definitely not like everyone else. So that just kind of set up this lifetime search for different ways of doing things. And when I was 17, I moved back into another closed loop system, which was a Volkswagen bus. And I went on tour with the Grateful Dead and just started traveling around and in this little bus. So I was looking at ways of doing 12-volt electrical systems,
Mhm.
doing easy rainwater, cooking, all these things that were for convenience of living in this small closed loop system. And so I was actually doing permaculture way before I even thought about what permaculture
Mhm.
was. But when I learned the word, that's when I really started studying and ventured off to Costa Rica. And that's where I started really looking for people doing permaculture. And that led me all over the world from Hawaii, just different countries, looking for any kind of culture who was actually connecting to our ecosystem.
When you say it was before you knew, because correct me if I'm wrong, I want to say the term permaculture kind of came out same time as the environmental movement was happening, like 70s, early 70s.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. Over in
Okay,
Australia,
sure.
Bill Mollison and David Holmgren coined the phrase permaculture. And I honestly think when it was first started, it was mostly geared in an agricultural sense. And it was like lazy man's farming or hammock farming, as I've heard it called as well. And I was looking more at the connection aspect of it. And I think that's really where permaculture has evolved since then. And I'm actually been working with John P. Milton, who was the creator of the environmentalism movement. He was the White House's first ecologist, and he was deeply connected to this relationships side of ecology, where it wasn't just resource extraction, but more of how are we interacting with the world, not only in our farming or our food production, but in our energy and even our social dynamics. And now there's even a spiritual aspect that brings all of this back into our hearts.
Interesting. Yeah, the way I kind of define the problem really is we're so disconnected from nature that we're missing out that why we feel the way we do. You know, it's not only that we're not eating the correct foods from nature, but we're not even enjoying the time and space or understand the cycles of nature and the seasons and everything. We're kind of just very comfortable in our own ways. And I think that's my own experience being a native Floridian. We don't really experience seasons, so I feel like that's kind of a stagnant way of living. But it's also really beautiful to learn that you can, take advantage of that and grow 12 months of the year.
Absolutely. And when you see like you say, one of our biggest problems is the disconnection of it all. And I see one of my biggest questions I get in the garden is how do I get rid of these pests in the garden? And um, I tell them, a healthy plant comes from healthy soil, and healthy soil comes from our interactions with that soil. And so we need to build the health of the microorganisms within the soil, which will feed a healthier plant, which will get rid of your pests. And the response I get is almost always the same, which is, no, no, what do we spray on the plant to get rid of the pest? And I think that really just summarizes where we're at with this disconnection. And I see the garden as my teacher in so many ways. And if we faced all of our issues with that same mentality of connection rather than just trying to spray poisons on the plant, I think we'd end up in a much more regenerative and healthy ecosystems all around us.
I honestly just don't trust the people who are producing these uh, chemicals. So that's a whole nother rabbit hole in itself. But it is frightening to think that yeah, we're almost conditioned to think like that's the only solution is just to spray something to make it resistant. Same with our bodies. We want to take antibiotics or vaccines. Well, there's nature's way of naturally fighting off certain diseases and pests as you mentioned.
I like to sit in the field of sacred ecology even before permaculture, because it's like starting in the heart before going to the mind. And we think about who we are. If we were to say, point to yourself, most of us would point to our heart. And most of us would go here because it's where thought originates. And the mind is just how we process that. And a lot of people spend more time on the scientific system than why we're doing it in the first place. So sacred ecology focuses on the relationships, on how each system interacts with the other system. And permaculture is rooted in that same concept where the needs of one system feed the yields of another, or vice versa. And this just really attracts me. That's why these two concepts and these two practices fit together so beautifully, because when I've seen many people with beautiful gardens, yet they may not be taking very good care of themselves, or they might be out doing things that are unhealthy, or all these things with unhealthy relationships. And then I've seen all these beautiful spiritual communities that may be using Miracle Grow or dumping bleach down their drains. So it's like both of these practices are so beautiful in so many ways. And when we bring this together, I feel that's when we've created this environment that can truly thrive, both internally and then manifest it out into the external world.
So I did graduate from FGCU, and I ended up taking the issues in culture and society, I think it was, like an interdisciplinary course. And basically I was introduced to this, the food forest, permaculture, all at the same time. I was learning like ecological communication, like the university's mission statement was changing, all these things were happening at once. And I felt like, in a nutshell, I was kind of overwhelmed with these problems that we were facing environmentally, collectively, and even just in the past 40 years with the environmental movement, how things were changing so rapidly with corporate ownership and whatnot. And then kind of given the solution in one semester, and was like, it just seemed like that was the answer to all of those problems.
Yes, that education is definitely the root of our future in my mind. And the ethics of permaculture have always been one of the things that have driven me to it. And I believe we've created in this world a system where the bottom line is everything. And you can go back in history to the assembly line where Henry Ford went from, just increased productivity by hundreds of percent simply by mass production. And this obviously could be a good thing. And in a way of more cars, it is a good thing. But if we study nature, nature doesn't work like that. It's not a continual infinite growth, and there's always cycles. And that's why I really love permaculture, because ultimately permaculture is rooted in indigenous wisdom. And most indigenous cultures always connected and rooted in nature. So nature has seasons, like you were saying, and it has these seasons of thriving and productivity, but it also has these seasons of rest. And I think that's one of the most exciting things about this time of COVID is it's forced a lot of people in this time of rest. And now all of a sudden we see fish thriving in the Venice canals. We see air pollution decreasing. We see health increasing in ways that we haven't seen in very long times, because we've been so fixated on this infinite growth. And I believe that's where the ethics of permaculture really help, because the three ethics of permaculture are the care for the people, the care for the earth, and of course, distributing all these things amongst our communities. And that's how nature works. If a oak tree drops all its leaves, it doesn't store them away into a safety deposit box and keep them for themselves or their grandchildren. It freely just cycles those nutrients through the whole entire ecosystem. And the microorganisms under the tree then share it with the mycelium, and the mycelium then networks all those things together, and it creates this beautiful tapestry. And when we go away from those patterns of nature, I believe that's when we start creating these toxic systems that are producing disease and stagnation. And we see a lot of that within our business models. So if every business model simply said, is this business good for people? Well, right there, half of the petroleum industries would go out of business. Is it good for the earth? Well, then the other half would go out of business. And it's like we're we're at a place where we think that this thing we invented called money is more important than the health of each other and the happiness of our society. And so it's the ethics have really given me a construct that guides pretty much every decision I make.
Yeah, it's incredible. I totally resonate. I mean, I'm, with the introduction to sustainability from FGCU, that really set me on the path to being mindful of my waste, of course, plastic use, where my food was coming from, all of these new things that I just didn't have the connection or awareness of. And it's crazy to think that it took until college to be introduced to the native tree and this whole new life that is always here for us, always has been. We've just been removed from it, whether that's society's choice or the conditioning of the environment we live in. It's still just our choice. We have that option to reconnect ourselves and do better for our each other and the planet, of course. So it is definitely full circle.
Well, I'm honestly really impressed with the younger generation today because when I was in my early 20s, let me say I wasn't thinking a lot about the environment. I was in my Volkswagen bus traveling around, mostly thinking about myself. And I've seen more youthful environmentalists today than I've ever seen. And I really believe that that's kind of nature's way of healing our planet. And if we look at like a little area of disturbance, it's always the pioneer species. It's always those nitrogen fixers that come in to try and heal that earth. Well, I believe the earth is creating those nitrogen fixers in our youth. And to see all these programs, these permaculture programs in colleges, the environmental programs around the world, I think that that's happening. And I'm really encouraged right now to see so much youth involved in the environmental movement.
Yeah, I understand that you offer some permaculture classes as well, and you have an upcoming one that sold out pretty quickly.
Yes, actually, it's we are really limiting the size of our classes due to COVID, and all of our classes are outdoors. So yeah, we sold out of this, sold this out 3 months before we even started. So it's really exciting to have that kind of interest, and I really wish we were able to host more people. But we did start our online permaculture classes that allow us to reach out globally and share with an unlimited size audience for anybody who's interested. And those are, of course, free of charge. So just trying to get the information out because this is our future and we're all in this together.
Definitely. So I'm just curious with the interest that you found from the people that applied to the course that's upcoming. Are they mostly older? What's the median age kind of look like?
Well, very fortunate because we get to experience a great diversity in our population. And I've had everyone from literally 80-year-old grandmothers, just like really interested in doing things differently, all the way to the 19-year-old, just super enthusiastic youth. So it's really exciting to see the diversity of people attracted to permaculture right now. And mostly it's because there's only one earth and we're all connected. It's like our food, everyone eats. So why not create that commonality and that connection through that? And the more diverse and the more we're all in this, I mean, just the more resilient we'll all be as a society.
Yeah, again, I think that's what COVID really, I always say it pulled the emergency brake for a lot of people. A lot of people might have not lost their job or whatever. And a lot
A
of
lot
people
of people
slowed
realized
down.
the job they were doing, they didn't like anyway.
Of course. Yeah, the reevaluation of that's, where I was putting my time, energy, and focus is to just do that. I definitely believe that there's way more to life and creating community and reconnecting with your tribe, for lack of better words. There's definitely um, your soul I think craves that. A lot of people feel lonely or like they're missing out on something. Well, that's their soul's way of calling to them, like, yeah, take me somewhere else, right? Like you're not resonating, you're not in alignment with what you should be experiencing. So I do think it's a huge awakening and a great time for people to find an outlet, find community gardens, find free permaculture classes online, whatever they feel guided to just educate themselves on how to be self-sufficient, just live alternatively with what the Texans experienced recently. You know, it's important to have these survival skills.
Yeah, that was a wonderful awakening for a lot of people. And this has happened many times around the world. If you look at New Zealand back in 2011, they had the major earthquake in Christchurch. And they, instead of just building they had almost a complete loss of infrastructure. And instead of just rebuilding everything, they were like, okay, well, let's actually build this in a regenerative way. And now they're known as the community garden community. And it's like, there's so much connection to food and community because everyone had to pull together. So it's a wonderful opportunity to realize that there are flaws in our power grids. There are flaws in our social grids. And how can we correct those for a more regenerative and sustainable future?
Now, you started the conversation with having a new aquaponic system in the Sustainable Kashi
Yeah,
garden. What do you call it?
absolutely.
The land? It's
It's an 80-acre
80
intentional
acres.
community
Okay.
here. We have about 100 residents. So there's always so many projects going on. And we actually closed about a year ago. So there's an exceptional amount of projects going on now because we haven't been hosting people. So we've been redesigning and rebuilding all of our structures. So we've built new outdoor classrooms. We've built more camping platforms. We build new tiny houses. We're building an off-grid juice bar with a little cafe area and stages for music. So it's really exciting to put 100 people's energy into design and into conceptualizing what does a regenerative community look like? Because ultimately, Sustainable Kashi wants to be a demonstration. We want to be an example for people to get their hands onto a system and say, oh, wait, I can do that. I'm not saying everybody should come live at Sustainable Kashi, but I would love for you to take Sustainable Kashi with you and actually create that community somewhere to where you can share and you can create potlucks, or you can create these tool shares or meal shares or some kind of way to make your life and the life around your community better. And I believe we can best serve in a way of showing you that that's possible. So it's really fun just manifesting all these things. Right now we're working on a fountain system that'll recirculate into a small hydroponics tray. And we're working on just systems that our rule is that every system has to be connected to 3 other systems. So we can't just put something up. It's got to be connected to something that is feeding something else. And I believe the more we live by that model, the more rich and abundant we'll all be.
Yeah, that's amazing. So that kind of brings me into the other question. That is what the land was intended to be the space of or for, right?
Yes, well, so we're located on Kashi Ashram, which was started back in 1976, and in Sebastian, Florida. And if you know anything of Florida history, Sebastian, Florida is a small little town, definitely not known for its forward thinking and progressive thoughts. It's a very small, as they say, it's a drinking town with a fishing problem. That's their tagline. So in walks this female guru, which a female guru is unheard of, and I mean even in the Indian culture. And then to put a ashram in the middle of Sebastian, Florida in 1976 was just unheard of. And then so now here we are, this like just out of the box thing right in the middle of Sebastian, Florida. And it's managed to make it for over 40 years now. And now not only has the ashram thrived, but about 6 years ago, we started the environmental program, which is Sustainable Kashi. And now we're connecting that earth to the heart. And it's just such a wonderful place to be able to demonstrate how your food, your energy, and your community are all connected.
Sure.
And it's like kind of like spokes on a wheel. The stronger each spoke is connected, the stronger the whole wheel is. Her vision was that everyone can come together under on the foundation of love and kindness. So it doesn't matter what you believe, it doesn't matter who you worship, it doesn't matter what you celebrate, but as long as we're all rooted in love and kindness, we're all connected on a humanistic and spiritual level.
And she planted the seed back there for everyone to enjoy the fruitful bearing here. So that's amazing.
It's such a beautiful story. Yes.
Do you find that more spiritual minded people are guided there, or it's a little bit of walks of life, I suppose?
Yeah, it's really fantastic because we have an amazing yoga program here, and we have amazing meditation programs, and we have an amazing permaculture program. So there's so many ways in, but it's like whatever is your passion, there's a place for you, and the container can hold you here. So that's just the fantastic part, is you might be talking to a Buddhist who's been practicing Buddhism his whole life, but yet he's sitting within a permaculture garden, fascinated by the tree, or under the Bodhi tree, just fascinated by the life. And when these interconnection, we create these intrinsic characteristics that just become more than each individual part. So 1 + 1 equals way more than 3. And it's nice to have that space where all those practices can come together, not only for the diverse and rich conversations that happen, but also because every day is basically a holiday in some religion. So if you celebrate them all, it's a pretty fun life.
It's a very unique cross-cultural experience that I think, the way the world has globalized, of course, in the past 30, 40, 50 years, whatever, it's incredible that you can actually be in a community surrounded by people from different backgrounds and speaking different languages, or whatever you might experience. And it's quite magical, the times that we're living in. Again, we have that choice to move forward with fear and separation and not understanding another person, or we can move together, with the power of love and kindness, and try to understand one another. And of course, the connection that we all share, the earth, the air, the land itself, food, like we have to protect that for not only this generation, but future generations.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really just redefining what it is that we cherish and what we value. And once we move away from this imaginary number, once we move away from this materialism, you start realizing that happiness, or experiential capital, that those things around us that really create our days, that's what makes us rich. And when I walk around barefoot telling stories, my life just feels so complete that I couldn't imagine any experience that I'd rather have. So it's really a wonderful, rich experience to live within such a diverse community.
So I'm curious, when you maybe leave that community, or it's almost like a micro world in itself, right? I could imagine. I've never been, but the way you describe it in the videos I've seen, but to kind of step out into this default world, some might identify it as, with the structured, you have your Walmart, the Publix, your food places, fast food, even this kind of weird, toxic way of living that so many people they know that as their day to day. Are you culture shocked still at some times to, witness that?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. Yeah, I actually, so I travel in the summer times. Anybody who's been in Florida knows that Florida summers can be intense at best.
They're brutal.
So what I've designed is a time where I teach here all winter, and then in summer I teach other places. So in traveling in the summers, yes, I will drive by the Walmarts, or I'll go through the airports, and I get to see, how the other half lives, or actually how the other 5, 6 lives, because there's a lot more of the real world than those little bubbles, like you were saying. And the first time, yeah, it was very shocking, actually, because I forgot, it's really easy to not see what you don't see every day. Right. But now I kind of look forward to that time, because it reminds me why I'm doing everything in the first place. And I want to be a place where people can see the possibilities. And there's the story of the yogi that goes up on top of the mountain and he just lives in bliss, but he's all by himself. So does he really make the difference? So I think it's important to be in the world, and share that different perspective with everyone, and just to sit in this beautiful bubble of like abundance and love is fantastic, but only if we're able to lift everyone up and for the betterment of all humans. I think that's the true value in what we're doing. I've personally learned to kind of wear like a soft armor around myself when I go out into the real world, because yeah, there is a lot of there's a lot of confusion in society right now. There's a lot of disconnection, and it's easy to fall into those pitfalls of despair. And so I have to kind of hold that touchstone of love and kindness within me and remember to go back to that, every morning. And I have a personal practice that allows me to find my own personal happiness every morning. And then I get the choice to share that with everyone around me.
With the inspiration to, I guess, work with Sustainable Kashi, was that from your experiences in Costa Rica, or was there a specific mentorship or somebody who inspired you to get involved with that?
Yeah. So it was about 8 years ago when an individual named Susei Cho, who is the son of Ma, the person who started Kashi, and he was actually the brilliant individual who was like, I want to start an environmental program here. Him and his sister Kwan Mei. And along with some of the other the younger generation here, from the kids, about all the people that moved here. So he came to me and asked advice on how to do it. And I came out and I looked at the property, and it was a beautiful ashram, but there really wasn't an environmental component. Mm-hmm. So I gave my ideas and thoughts. And then I honestly moved to Hawaii, and I was like, I never really expected to ever come back to this project. Mm-hmm. And then when I moved back after I built the log cabin in East Orlando, I had a friend, I was wanting to move away from Orlando and towards a beautiful beach community. And basically I was sitting and trying to manifest a place that I could do yoga, permaculture, surf, be in nature, and just have a loving community all around me. And everybody was just like, wow, that's a lot. You're never going to find that. And it was about 2 weeks later that my friend Matt Hunter was offered this position as a director here at Sustainable Kashi. And he was moving out of Florida and didn't take the position. He's like, but he recommended me. And I was like, oh, I remember Sustainable Kashi. And I went back there, and they had done a lot of the things I had recommended. Like a lot of the trees, there were already 300 fruit trees in the ground. There were already a garden established. And I was like, okay, I can do this. And that was 5 years ago, and the rest is history.
Wow. So do you know if they are using, like, where are they sourcing money from? Is it donation based or?
Well, the financial structure is pretty large. It's over $1 million budget every year, but it's a functioning retreat center. It's we do events, we do workshops, classes. So there's many spokes in this wheel, and Sustainable Kashi is only just one of them.
I love it, but it seems to be like ever growing and expanding and changing through, the adaptive stages that we've all had to face in the past year and a half. I understand it's so close to the public now, or?
Yeah, we still haven't opened. We're doing a few small private groups, but yeah, we haven't opened to the general public yet, just because of COVID. We are a functioning and intentional community. So because there's so many people here and there's a large percentage of elderly, we're really trying to be cautious of inviting COVID into the community. So we're looking at September at reopening, depending on how everything goes with the virus. But it's been really tricky to have this beautiful 80-acre retreat center with it's basically built to share, and not being able to share it with people. So it's there's been many shifts in our designs. We've gone online with a lot of our classes and our yoga. And so we're really trying to find that way that we can still serve and share everything and be safe. One of my favorite questions is, what does the world look like in 2030? And hopefully I'm still around and doing some kind of work. But I see the future, and I see a regenerative future coming from small, decentralized communities. And that's one thing I believe is the biggest benefit of COVID and all these environmental catastrophes is people are seeing the importance of community. And if you spent a year locked up in a New York apartment building, isolated from the world, you're looking for a change right now. So it's like the importance of having support systems that are resilient to these catastrophes is so important. So in 2030, I see more communities connected and more uh, communities established around the world, and these communities creating networks of trade that may be just barter based. And I also see advances in technology such as space exploration, and I see a lot of reconnection to ourselves and a disconnection from these systems that we've created that may not necessarily be the most healthy for our society and for ourselves. So I see an increase in happiness, I see an increase in health, and I see people living their passions versus making a living. But it's really exciting because if you look at young ecosystems, they're all competition based. Like if you have a disturbance, all these plants are going to be fighting for sunlight. They're going to be fighting for water. They're going to be fighting for space. But as that system matures, you're going to start seeing the succession of hardwoods. You're going to start seeing live oaks or apex species trees. And those are actually going to go from competition to supporting other species. And I believe that's really the transition that we're in, is we're moving from that fighting competition stage into supporting each other and actually creating the regenerative future that we all are destined to be a part of.
Mhm.
So I'm very excited for the future.
I love it. Yes. Imagine all the people. It'll be great. I definitely support that vision, and I can definitely see it unfolding, right before our eyes. It's just a matter of choosing what outlet you want to kind of pay attention to. There's a lot of people still paying attention to the news and sourcing negative information. This is why I created this outlet for people to share better things that are happening in the world, how we can collectively come together as individuals and groups just to support one another with these great ideas and projects and just better ways of doing things. It's just, it's one of those things, if you know better, you do better. And I think at this point, there's no denying that we know how we can do better. We're just not doing it. So just really putting into action what we know is right and continuing to move forward like that.
Absolutely. And I am honored to be any part of this change that I can be. And if anybody is looking for ways or strategies to enter into this regenerative future, feel free to contact me. My email is terry@terrymeer.com. You can find my website at terrymeer.com or learn more about Sustainable Kashi at sustainablekashi.com. And there you can find the free workshops, free online classes. Also, we have a YouTube channel that is just jam-packed full of information that you can just spend hours watching and just really get an idea of how to enter into this wonderful regenerative future. I mean,
It's all
it's only 100 years, that we were into complete ecological beauty. The internet's only 30 years old. It's like when you really look at the time that we've done as much damage as we've done, it's just a drop. It's just a little tiny speck of time. So all this can be undone. It's just a matter of making the choice to do it.
sure.
And just like going from the icebox to the refrigerator, it just takes that decision that, yeah, this is the move. This is the direction we have to go as a species, or things will get a lot harder.
Yeah. And I like that you mentioned earlier that, the youthfulness, I guess environmentalism or environmentalists rather, they have a lot of hope. They don't seem to be disempowered. They understand that there's a lot more of them than there are of
Yeah.
the others, I guess, the elder power holders at this point. But you know, the more people that are throwing solar panels up on their roof, deciding to go off grid, maybe not paying their electric bill because they're not, you know, just finding other ways to create their own systems rather than, you know, depending on this other system that's always just been there. Yeah, it's definitely a possibility, and it's happening. So that's why I love having these conversations, because it does give me hope. You know, it kind of gives me a, um, I can see the light at the end of the tunnel. You know, I know that it's not just all falling apart. You know, it really is kind of, yeah, it's fixing itself, but slowly but surely. You know, it does. It's just, again, not something that's highlighted, which is why I spend, you know, hours and days doing research to find people who are doing these types of things. And hope to just take a little bit of their time to dig their brain and figure out, you know, how did it all start and what's their network of people, you know. So
It's
it's
fantastic.
fantastic.
Yeah, I really appreciate the work you're doing. And Rob Greenfield gave me the best advice. He said, "Don't try and change the world. That's just too big of a task to do. And we might not save things. We might not make everything better, but you can make the world around you better.
Yes.
And that could actually make the change for somebody, because they'll see it and they'll be like, oh, I want that. I want to be happy. I want to be, at least internally, be that change." And so I think you spreading that message out there makes the world a better place. So whether we actually fix everything, that's yet to be seen. And I have hope, but honestly, I'm not in this to save the world.
Yeah,
It'd be
no,
nice if
I
that
don't think
happens.
I totally agree. And that's, I mean, I kind of struggled with this, you know, back to the college experience. I was given this solution with permaculture. I'm like, oh my gosh, so now I have the answer. Like, I'm gonna save the world. And I really became so passionate about being, you know, an activist with GMO, the water pollution, everything. Got involved with the colloquium class, was a student, you know, naturalist, and was putting so much of my energy and not actually taking care of myself, and even feeling like I was the problem, right? It's like this victim mentality that no, not everyone, like collectively, you know, my grandparents are part of the problem. They're not here to fix it, but I can still choose today, tomorrow, and every day beyond that to just choose, you know, make wiser decisions and, you know, clean up the mess that they maybe started. But that's the best we can all do. And, you know, that if that's the stories that we are sharing, then that's, I think, the next best step, you know, rather
Well,
than
you've
not
definitely
discussing.
you've given me some hope just to see the light in your eyes. So it's really exciting.
Thank you for recognizing that.
This is a fantastic conversation, and
Yes,
thank you
I
for.
love it. It's very refreshing to have these conversations, I like to say.
No, it's nice to have people having these conversations. So
Sure.
thank you just for holding the space. And yeah, this year is really exciting because I've had so much quiet time. I've been able to finish my book, and this is a 5-year project on basically a how to simplify your life and how to get a lot of that disconnection, wash it away, how to reconnect to the heart, the people around you, the community. And it's built a lot like those spokes in the wheel, where each chapter is another one of those spokes. And at the end of each chapter is an activity to help build that strength. And it's been a dream for a long time, and this has been the year where I've been able to actually put the time and dedicate the energy to get it out. And it will be publishing that this year. It's already written and illustrated, and the only thing left is just the final aesthetics and getting it just right. So I'm really excited. There's more information on my website on Terry Meer if you want to either pre-order or just learn more about the book.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Terry. I look forward to visiting the Sustainable Kashi when I return to Florida, hopefully in the near future, and everything kind of returns back to normal, of course. I really am so thankful for this opportunity to share this conversation and space with you today. So thank you very much for being open to the opportunity, of course, and continuing to follow your heart and doing what's best for everybody in the world during these times.
Thank you. And thank you for all the work you're doing.